All right, good afternoon. We are live. Just thought I'd do this afternoon because there's been some interesting stuff come out of the SEC in the States around some Bitcoin ETFs. Now, if you followed me on the channel, I've spoken about Bitcoin ETFs over the last, say, month or so. I found it very, very exciting indeed that there were a number of Bitcoin ETFs that were approved by the SEC, the regulator over in the United States. Now, if you've been following, you'll know that those ETFs specifically, hey Kiki, were futures ETFs. So they don't operate in the same way that a traditional ETF would, where you're holding a basket of maybe stocks or assets specifically. They still allow for you to trade on a regular basis at relatively low cost. But with a futures ETF, they work on futures contracts. Now, it's important to go back to the basics and some of the foundations around that because the SEC, specifically for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, feel comfortable in authorizing an ETF in Bitcoin, in this instance, only if it ran on futures contracts. And the ProShare Bitcoin ETF, when it launched last month, had the highest trading volume of any ETF launched in history. The numbers were absolutely through the roof. And that further kind of cemented and gave credence to the fact that Bitcoin is a very much an asset class that is now going to be and is being adopted in the mainstream. So that's a little bit of a background. At the moment, currently, there are two futures Bitcoin ETFs that are on the market. There are due to be another two or so approved through November this month. Actually, one's going to be approved or scheduled to be approved around my birthday on Monday next week. So there are two more futures ETFs that are due to be signed off and come into market by the end of the year. Now, futures contracts work very, very differently. So just to give you an idea of how the futures ETFs would basically work, essentially it's going to be an ETF that will be run on futures contracts. So essentially the future value of Bitcoin at any given time. So essentially, they will basically make trades or take out contracts that will say, right, we will buy Bitcoin on the 1st of January, and we believe that the price of a Bitcoin is going to be $60,000, for example. Now, the danger with that lies in the fact that if the price of a Bitcoin is, say, 55,000 on the 1st of January, they still have to buy that Bitcoin contract out at 60,000. They lose money. If the price of a Bitcoin is 65,000, well, they've got a $5,000 discount on each of the coins that they basically buy. So that's how futures generally tend to work. Now, interestingly, as I've said, the SEC were happy for ETFs to be approved under those contracts because those contracts are regulated under US financial structures by the SEC. That's an important point because we're going to come back to this. So what's been denied? So VanEck is a company that essentially has proposed an ETF for Bitcoin that would hold Bitcoin directly using the spot price, which is if you are buying Bitcoin at the moment via eToro, Coinbase, Binance, Kraken, or any of the exchanges, if you're buying it at the spot price. Now, remember, with the futures contract, it is literally on the future price of the asset, so Bitcoin specifically. You are not directly taking ownership of Bitcoin. You're not holding the asset directly. What VanEck were proposing was an ETF that would do precisely that. It would hold Bitcoin directly, buy it on the spot price, hold it, and then obviously trade, sell as and when they want to for profit, depending on what's going on in the market. Now, I reviewed the ProShares ETF, and if you've not watched that video, it might be worthwhile going back to watch that. It will be there probably about maybe 6 weeks ago, and the thumbnail will say ProShare Bitcoin ETF. One of the things that I pointed out with that is that traditionally with an ETF, you have very, very low cost to administer, to use that ETF. Typically, ETFs, if you're going on Vanguard in the investment world, move stepping away from crypto very, very quickly, you can access these things at 0.08. The ProShares ETF had a cost ratio of 0.98%, so almost 1%, and that didn't include any transaction fees and any storage fees either, because it is a futures contract, which meant that actually, in hindsight, whilst it was a very, very good proposition and it's new for Bitcoin, and yes, it had huge trading volumes to begin with, unfortunately, it's very, very expensive for the retail investor to invest in. So institutional investors who may want exposure to, Bitcoin, happily can go and use that. But as a retail investor, I personally didn't see any reason why you would go and buy that ProShares Bitcoin ETF, because it is way too expensive. You could get it way, way cheaper and actually hold the asset yourself if you used other providers. So that's a downside. And that is one big downside of the crypto ETF. Now, the VanEck one, because it was based on the spot price of Bitcoin, you could argue would have had a better price ratio, so cost, to actually use it. But the SEC have basically said they are not going to approve such ETFs right now. Now, if you've been following me for a while, I am very, very excited about the possibility of, DeFi within the crypto space, and very, very excited about the prospect of there being Bitcoin ETFs and exchange traded products that are authorized, regulated, signed off by the authorities like the SEC. Because what that essentially means is that you will be able to have huge institutions, investment houses, discretionary fund managers, pension funds now have access to a new asset class, which has proven itself now to be a good hedge against inflation and a store of value. And as these pension funds and these investment houses look to diversify and look for better growth for their clients, an ETF that is regulated, signed off by an authority, essentially gives credence and the okay for them to dump a load of money into it. And I mentioned before that if you look at the pension providers specifically, there's over $16 trillion in pension funds worldwide. Now, you wouldn't need to see much of a diversification of that entire 16 million to all of a sudden get to a real place where the predictions around Bitcoin hitting $500,000 a coin become reality. Because even if you take a 1% diversification of that entire 16 trillion, we're just talking pension funds here, that will take Bitcoin to the moon in terms of prices. The news at the moment, though, is that with the FCC not approving this iteration of a Bitcoin ETF by VanEck, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get that mass adoption from institutions right now. Potentially. So it is a little bit of a blow. And I've been looking at the Bitcoin chart actually over the last kind of like week or so, 5 days or so. And if you just look at this, we can see that at the moment, we can see that there was a peak here on the 15th, which is literally only 4 days ago. The news about this ETF not being approved came out. Well, that happened about 3 days ago. The news has been filtering down over the last day or so. So if we go back 4 days, we can see that Bitcoin was at 66,144. It's taken a clear hit over the last 4 to 5 days. And that's interesting. Today, probably bobbling around about the 60,000. I did look at it this morning. It was about 59,000 roughly. So whether this is as a direct impact of the SEC not approving the VanEck ETF, probably does have something to do with it. But what I do want to talk about is a couple of things. First and foremost, the regulation. Because regulation has been one thing that we've spoken about before, and I think is around the corner and is on the horizon. And it is an important factor to really make sure that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as a whole can enter into the mainstream, certainly from the point of view of a financial services industry point of view, so that investment houses, pension funds can really get involved and start investing in this new asset class. And it's interesting, actually, because Coinbase They IPO'd this year. They actually called for an independent regulatory body last month. I'm just going to show you this part of a news snippet that came out in October. So it says Coinbase has called for the creation of a single dedicated body to regulate digital assets, arguing that the current oversight is too fragmented and the US century-old securities law are ill-suited to today's cryptocurrency markets. That is absolutely spot on. Even if you look here domestically, here in the UK, the FCA is way, 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 way behind the curve when it comes to cryptocurrency, just way, way behind the curve. And what we've seen is the adoption of cryptocurrency seems to have gone on a bit of a parabolic movement right now. And I guess when you look at the SEC specifically, someone like Gary Gensler, who heads up the SEC, he's delivered lectures in America in universities around the blockchain technology. So he absolutely gets it. He understands it. And he will be probably the first person who will, I guess, admit that from a regulatory point of view, they are a little bit behind the curve because the adoption of cryptocurrency and the track record that cryptocurrency has built up over such a short period of time is now got to that point where there is mass adoption and people want to invest in it. And one thing that you can definitely guarantee yourself is that the Americans don't want to be second best to anything. And this is especially when you look at everything that's happened with China banning cryptocurrencies because they don't want any competition with the digital yuan. They see that very much as an opportunity to be the leaders in this space. And that leads us very nicely onto the conversation of, well, what does the outlook actually look like for 2022, specifically for crypto? Because whilst America doesn't want to be left behind and they do want to be leaders, you just need to have a look at some of the news articles that I've come across over the last, say, month or two, where they're looking at trying to make Miami the center of crypto mining, for example. And the same thing I believe is being muted for places like New York. So America are really, really serious about this. They can see the opportunity around this. But unfortunately, the regulatory regime, the regulatory framework that is currently in place is not built for this. They've said no to this because of the age-old arguments of safety, market manipulation, money laundering, all of those things that many people in the crypto space will say, well, you can easily sidestep all of those and you can, pretty much rebuttal every single one of them at any given time with some very, very simple narrative. The regulators don't see it like that, though. And that is where there's a disconnect. And that's where the challenge lies. Because in order for the regulators to be happy, they want to have robust regulatory frameworks to ensure that they have oversight. Now, many people will argue that this is completely against the whole point of cryptocurrency being decentralized and not being able to be controlled. However, is this a necessary step for mass adoption? I believe it is to a certain extent, particularly if you want to get into the real application of DeFi and have that run from a country point of view. There were some comments from Gary Gensler that were actually quite interesting to hear, and this was one of them right here. He said in a recent article, he said, we need to update and freshen our rules to ensure that while retail investors and any individuals has First Amendment rights to speak and so forth, that they are not misleading the public, they are not manipulating the public, manipulating the markets. The big concern is manipulating the markets. I'm going to be doing a video later on this evening on the channel about pump and dump schemes, because I was approached last Wednesday to participate in a pump and dump scheme. And I've been inside that Telegram group since Wednesday night, Thursday morning. And in the course of matter of days, like 3 or 4 days, they pumped 3 or 4 coins. And it's really, really astonishing to see. And many people will say that it's easy money. And there's a few videos here on YouTube talking about this is easy money, you should get involved. But unfortunately, if you put this into the realm of the stocks and the stock market where it is regulated, this is illegal activity. These are the concerns of the regulators. It's the concern of the SEC. It's the concern of the FCA here in the UK. But what does it say in terms of an outlook for Bitcoin for 2020? I made a video around about the same time when the ProShares Bitcoin ETF was due to come online, where I spoke about the fact that Bitcoin would get to 65,000 by the end of this year. At that point, I believe the price for Bitcoin was about 50,000 or something like that. We've seen that mark come and pretty much go. Yes, we're trading at around about 60,000 right now. It's off the high right now. That's fine. Many people are still speculating that Bitcoin could potentially go to 100,000 by the end of the year. We had Radic on the channel probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, on live on a Sunday evening, and his prediction was 100,000 for Bitcoin by the end of the year. His prediction for Ethereum by the end of the year was 10,000. So what does this actually mean for Bitcoin, bearing in mind that they've said no to a spot price ETF, the VanEck one? Well, one of the things that the SEC did say in commentary after their decision was that they definitely see that 2022 will be a good year for Bitcoin in terms of mass adoption, because they acknowledge that people want in on the game. Whilst it's not appropriate that they authorize or sign off on the VanEck Bitcoin ETF that will work on the spot price, actually take ownership of Bitcoin, they said that they do see in the near future that there will be regulation put in place, and there will be a sign off for that kind of ETF in the future, possibly 2022. They've been a little bit non-committal in the language around that. But what that basically said is they are aware of it. They are aware that they have to do something. If you have the likes of Coinbase saying we need an independent regulatory body, they are aware of that. The SEC is not a place at the moment of people where people don't understand what Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is all about. As reluctant as their U-turn has been over the years to get them to this point, they are fully aware that it's something that they cannot ignore. And they do want to take the front running position as the center, or maybe the country that leads the way on this. So in 2022, I think that they will have more ETFs, certainly futures ETFs that will come out, for sure. I think there will definitely be more. And I think we need more in order for the price points for these things to come more in line with what you're seeing with traditional ETFs, although it probably won't go down that low. But if we talk about the ProShares being at 0.98%, you would hope with more competition coming through and more ETFs coming to the market, that you could probably get those price points down to about maybe 0.75, 0.5% to actually hold a futures ETF. Whether you should use them as a retail investor, though, is one question. You may decide that you want to if the price is more palatable, but you need to make sure that it fits within your investment strategy. I'm a firm believer. I probably wouldn't use one because I'd rather just go buy it and hold it myself. However, if those do come along and they do work okay, and they do get their act together, and they do try to build a solid framework around how they might regulate cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin ETFs specifically, and maybe try and get the controls and reins on some of the exchanges like Binance, for example, who have come under a little bit of fire from regulators. Pump and dump is a prime example of why they need to be regulated, because although that kind of stuff is against their terms and conditions, that stuff is happening. Regulation will put a stop to those kind of things happening, because it would become illegal and someone will be held accountable for it. So next year, I think that the price of Bitcoin will still continue to do really, really well. I think we're in a position at the moment where we're heading into the Christmas period. And traditionally, Christmas and the New Year season has been good historically for cryptocurrencies. The question is going to be, does the sentiment of this news damage the confidence that we've seen with the news about all of these ETFs coming to the market? I think in the transitory short-term periods, maybe it does, and maybe we've seen a little bit of that over the last 5 days or so. But I think if you believe in Bitcoin and you believe in cryptocurrency, nothing has really changed. Nothing has really changed. It's still there as a hedge against inflation. It's still there as a store of value. Nothing's changed apart from just a little bit of news. I found this really, really fascinating. I guess there is one other thing that I do want to address, and that is, many people who follow my channel are relatively new into investing as a whole, and relatively new into, crypto as a whole. if you are invested in Bitcoin and you are holding some at the moment, look, you may be looking at the charts right now, and you might look at that and think that's horrible, right? Because it's a 5,000 point dip, pretty much. You may be thinking that's absolutely horrible. Maybe looking at what you have in there, you may be down, a few £100 or a couple of £1,000. This comes with the territory. Cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is fundamentally going to be volatile. That comes with the game. I mean, me personally, I'm possibly looking at maybe getting in a little bit more at this point. I might wait a little bit more. To be honest, I should have gone in there when it was about 59, because I last went in, I believe. When did I last go in? I went in probably about a few weeks ago to buy some more. If you zoom out here, but at the moment we're still at over $60,000 a coin. Will that continue? We might see a little bit of a dip, but that all comes with the territory. If you're buying this thing, especially if you're buying it on a monthly basis, then you're getting the benefit of pound cost averaging, dollar cost averaging. That is going to help your investment strategy overall, because essentially you're going to have that smoothing kind of effect if you hold this over the long term and you buy this over the long term. So make sure that, number one, you have good reasons for buying it, and as long as nothing changes fundamentally with Bitcoin, we will see that it should come good long term. You just have to hold your nerve. Volatility is part of the game. Volatility is an opportunity. This might go straight up back up to 63,000 today. It might go to 65 today. We don't really know what's going to happen, but volatility is part of the game. So just hold tight. Don't let this panic you. Yes, it's a little bit of a, unfortunate oversight by the SEC and Gary Gensler, but they have fundamentally good reasons for saying no to this right now. There are lots of issues around, well, okay, if you're going to be buying this and you're doing this as based on the spot price within an ETF, well, you're going to have ETF holders. So the whole custodian of who holds the Bitcoin and how is it allocated, because typically when you invest, you have to segregate your client money to specific accounts. So how does it actually work within the structure of an ETF specifically? These things are pretty much these things are brand new. It's a new piece of technology that is being almost square pegged into a round hole using existing financial instruments, where really, to be honest, this new technology deserves a new financial instrument to go alongside it that is as fluent and as dynamic and innovative as Bitcoin is. But the financial services industry moves slowly, and that's what we're seeing right now. But what I'm saying here, guys, is yes, it's not great news. Yes, it may dent the confidence for a short period, but I think it'll be transitory. If you're buying Bitcoin, all the fundamental reasons are pretty much exactly the same. So just carrying what you're doing, but please understand it is going to be volatile. And as always, you're going to carry risk. Do not take any of this as financial advice. You have to make the best decision for you. But I came across this story this morning and I thought it was very, very interesting. And knowing that it happened 3 days ago, seeing the correlation in the Bitcoin price kind of like fall off, I thought was interesting. And I thought I'd do this live just as a piece of commentary, a piece of news as well. Let me just shout out a few people. Ace is on here as usual. We've got GT Playboy on here as usual. Kiki's on here. Donna, how are you? Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon on this live. I do have a video this evening. Again, it's going to be on the pump and dump. Very, very interesting. Go watch that. It's going to be live at 5 p.m. I wouldn't have done this if this wasn't a good piece of news that I thought I'd cover. I'll be doing more of this, certainly in the new year as well, as we start to build out. For those of you who aren't aware, I do have a short film coming out on my birthday, which is next Monday, the 22nd at 5 p.m. I will play you a short preview, second trailer to that. So I'd appreciate you watching it, sharing it, liking it. If you do see it, it is longer form content. I will warn you right now, but it is there to hopefully give you a little bit of an insight into my backstory. People ask me a lot of questions about how I ended up in Canary Wharf, so on and so forth. So it covers a lot of that, goes back a little bit further as well. But it's meant to be motivational, inspirational in its making, and I hope that it does motivate and inspire people. So Irene is saying here, do something on Lucid stock, please. You know what? I am going to do something on Rivian, because Rivian IPO'd last week. So Rivian is another EV company, which is obviously there as a competitor to Tesla. What is the Rivian stock price right now? The last time I checked, it was $129 a share, which, look, it's not within their control. It's $149 a share. I mean, I looked at this, I think, on Friday. So it's seen, the share price is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, people talk about Tesla being overvalued. Rivian have not even sold one car yet. Yes, they've got a contract to supply Amazon with delivery vehicles, but they haven't actually produced a car yet. They're not in profit yet, and the price is $149 a share. It is absolutely bonkers. So I will talk a little bit about that. And I mentioned Rivian because I think Rivian, to a certain extent, falls in the same category as Lucid, in the fact that it is still a relatively new company. There is no, well, Rivian do have cars out on the road at the moment, but they haven't actually sold anything. You know, they haven't actually properly entered the marketplace just yet. And whenever you look at these new incumbents into the EV space, the guys behind Rivian, it's not their fault that the share price is $149 a share. What takes a share price to $149 a share is essentially market enthusiasm around a particular sector and a new company that potentially could partake in market share and winning over market share. I'm very, very bullish on Tesla purely because I have a Tesla. I've had one for a while, and I am an investor in it. And I believe that they've got the march on everybody else trying to enter into the market. So I will do something on Lucid. I will do something on Rivian as well. Maybe Rivian will arrive maybe next week or something like that. But I find it very, very interesting, the EV space right now. What I would say is that if you are going to be investing in these kind of companies, as always, you've got to do your research, right? You've got to try and get a good understanding of what the business is all about. You know, with people like Rivian and Lucid, you're not going to be able to base your decision on, you know, sound fundamentals in terms of the accounting, because they're not making any money. They'll be loss making right now. And Tesla was in that place back in 2012. I wish that I invested at that point when the share price was at $6 a share, right? And you have to very much make your decision based on whether you believe in the mission of the company and whether you believe that they can actually win over the market share that you would hope that they can, or what they're projecting that they can, with all of the competition that is coming to the market. Tech is a huge part of the equation when you look at the EV space as well. So a lot of the value of Tesla is wrapped up in the technology and the future value in terms of the strides that they're making. I mean, some of the video, people will say that I'm biased on Tesla, and I am. I'll openly admit that. But I strongly believe in the vision and the fact that they do have a strategic advantage, or at least that is my belief. So there it is, guys. Spencer's asking, what do I think of Polkadot? It isn't one that I actually hold. In my crypto portfolio at the minute, I've got Bitcoin, Ethereum. I have got some Tizo. I've got some Mana, which is Decentraland. I need to look at Solana as one. I've got some basic attention to token as well within my portfolio, because I like that, and I like the whole Brave thing. I was going to do a video on that shortly, so that will come a bit in, but I don't have Polkadot right now. I'm just looking at Brandon's comment here. People expecting it to compete, hence the price. Yeah, well, look, let's talk. I could talk about this all day. Whether they can compete or not is very much a long shot. They have not produced a car yet. They haven't sold a car yet. They've got the agreement with Amazon. That's all they've basically got. I mean, they're within their forecast. They're saying they hope to be able to deliver 1,000 vehicles by, I think it's by the end of 2022 or something like that. If you think about that in comparison to the number of cars that Tesla are delivering, they are way, 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 way behind. So whether they can compete or not, yes, they might be able to compete, but they're not just competing with Tesla, who they are burgeoned to be competition to. They also need to compete with the likes of VW, who, from a global point of view, market share in the EV space, they are second behind Tesla. And Tesla have VW as a big threat to them. So how much of a threat does VW actually mean or represent to a new incumbent like Lucid or like Rivian? It's a very interesting space. It's going to be dynamic. It's going to be fast moving. It really is going to be one of those things where, you know, you just have to watch it and look at, you know, the teams and the progress that they're making and make your decision based on, right, do you believe that it's going to happen? Because at the end of the day, a lot of people didn't believe that, you know, Tesla would do as well as it did. The bulls have been, well, the bears, the short sellers have been wrong for so long. The bulls have been right because Elon makes the difference. Elon really does make the difference. Does the team behind Rivian have the gold dust, that factor to be able to really push that business beyond, you know, all of the challenges that they are going to face? I don't know that. That's, again, one of the things that you have to make sure that you are 100% confident with. And as always, just make sure that you're allocating, you know, an amount that is reasonable to those kind of things, because they are very highly speculative. You know, just got to be sensible with it. Diversification, allocation, got to be really sensible with it in terms of your risk management. There's a question on here about GB News. Interesting. Which clip did you see? Nay say never. To be honest, I've not been on GB News. A long story. Basically, like, they were very how can I put this nicely without maybe annoying people? Not that I should care, because this is very much my these are my values. But they took a contrarian stance to my beliefs when it comes to things like Black Lives Matter. And after, you know, the Euros final with Sancho, Rashford, and Bukayo Saka, there were a couple of things that they did that I didn't really like. And so I said to my team, I said, look, I don't want to do that anymore, because if they're going to take that kind of stance and not be able to see that, you know, football is being abused for missing penalties, and the source of their abuse is the color of their skin, the same color of skin that I have, then that is problematic for me. And because it doesn't align with my belief system, I just kind of stepped away from it, because whilst the show that I was on and commented on as a business kind of analyst and financial guy didn't really feed into those kind of narratives, the station as a whole had this air that they did. And in my mind, I was like, okay, so if you're happy to have a conversation where you want to have a genuine conversation where both sides can come to the table, I believe that you're better being involved in that kind of environment if you can present the opposite side of the spectrum and be given the time to actually have a debate, actually have a conversation about those things, in opposed to dissert it and let it be an echo chamber of what their narrative is. And that was my belief going into it. But after the stance that they took with, you know, the footballers and all that kind of stuff, that was kind of like the last straw. And that is the honest answer as to why I'm not on GB News anymore. I want to do more TV in the new year. So we'll see what happens with that. But it is what it is, I guess. But I'm not going to do anything that doesn't kind of align with my personal beliefs. And yeah, that was a point that was clear to see for me. But anyway, guys, there's been a good number of you on here this afternoon. I do appreciate you. Listen, let me just leave you with the second trailer to my short film. You may have seen it. It debuted yesterday at 12 p.m. But it's going to go live Monday 5 p.m. It's going to be my birthday. It's a nice day to put it out. Here it is. But I do thank you, every single one of you, for watching. I appreciate you. Have a good afternoon, and I'll see you at 5 p.m. this evening. Here's the trailer. Here's trailer 2. I never really got to kind of understand or know how the whole fostering came about. And I'd love to hear your side of the story.
Right, now then.
me being sort of 7, I was excited. I'm going to get to go on the plane for the first time. That was exciting for me. I didn't know anything about it. And obviously, when I got over there, shock and horror. Oftentimes when you find yourself in that kind of situation, it's very easy to doubt yourself. And believe me, imposter syndrome starts to kick in, because it did for me.